August 16th, 2016, gathered in the City Center Conference Room at 351 West Center in Provo, Utah. This meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube, Provo City Council, where it will also be available for on-demand viewing. We'll begin with roll call. Mr. Parker.
Eddie Parker. John Curtis.
Dave Harding.
George Stewart.
Barry Winterton.
Kate Appier. Bryce Mumford.
Janine Weiss.
Dave Connect.
Dave Sewell.
Kim Santiago.
Brian Jones.
Liz Strachan.
We will now have opening prayer by Janine Weiss for City Recorder.
Our dear, kind, and eternal Father in heaven, we're very grateful this day for the opportunity that we have to be in attendance and to participate in this council work meeting. We're grateful, Heavenly Father, for the time and the service that our administration and our council members put into this city. And we ask that Thy Spirit might be with them, that we might discuss the items that are important to the city with open minds and with fairness and with the idea of helping this city to grow and become a better city. We're grateful, Heavenly Father, for those people that serve in the armed forces, and we ask a special blessing that they might be protected and kept safe, and that their families might be protected also. And we say these things very humbly in the name of Thy beloved Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. The first item of business is an introduction of Teri McCabe, who has been recommended to serve on the library board. If you wouldn't mind coming to the podium, we just would love to have you introduce yourself to the council. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Teri. I live in the Franklin neighborhood. Dave Harding is my representative. Anything else you want to know?
What was your interest in serving on the library board?
Well, just just to help out in the community. You know, that's really it. Yeah.
Do you frequent the library?
Yeah, I do, actually. And check out their website, see what books are available, what books you have to put on hold. Yeah. That's actually where I had my wedding reception. Yeah.
So can you make any recommendations?
For books? Well, I know that Philippa Gregory just released a new book. I don't know if it's out in America yet, so it's about the three queens.
Any questions for Ms. McCabe? So we just have we started this sort of tradition of inviting our board members to come and meet with us either here in the council work session or in our council meeting, just so that we get to know who you are and you get to see us and know who we are. Sometimes when we make appointments, we don't always get that sort of interaction. So
actually, I played soccer with Brother Stewart's daughter, Mary.
Okay, well, that's your claim to fame too. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we appreciate you coming, taking the time to meet with us.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terry.
The second item of business is a discussion regarding the process for quarterly review of the fees, the 25 fees. We started this, I don't know, a year ago maybe. And there are 300 fees, and we're going to have the administration bring 25 per quarter to us so that we could evaluate what the subsidies were for those fees. If the fees were in, at the right amount of cost recovery. There were some questions initially as to what the cost was to provide the services for these fees, and we didn't know what the cost was. So initially, the reason for looking at these fees was, one, to identify what the cost was of providing the service, and two, was how much are we recouping for the cost of these services. And if we are subsidizing some of these fees, does it make sense to subsidize, and why? And so that's kind of why, in a nutshell, why we started. I don't know, John, if you have any more to add to that, Mr. Borgett, but.
No, I think you outlined it well.
Okay, so that's why we began this process, and we've gone through a few or two sets. We went to the rec center set, and then we went to the community development set most recently, and we ended up making some pretty significant changes, I think, in the fees in the community development set of fees. And so when I asked the administration when they would be coming forward with the next set of fees, and Mayor asked if he could have a discussion with the council about this process. So we can turn the time over to you, Mayor, if you'd like to.
Sure. I think my concern came from a couple of levels. One is we never have defined when the council asks for something or has feelings about something, when that ends. And so we can go back for many, many councils who made statements or requests, and we've never really tied a bow around those and said they're done and they continue. So one aspect is to simply have the council clarify that this is one that they would like to continue. But I also, as you consider that, I'd like you to think about the discussion we just had with the Planning Commission. And over a year ago, I made some of those same comments myself. I saw the West Side Connector being finished in the high school and asked the council to spend time with that. And had we spent time with that we had spent with budget, I think we would have been able to answer all of those questions today. So while they're both good, it becomes, I think, a matter of priorities and where we spend the time. We didn't keep track of the hours, but I think we're certain that it was hundreds, or maybe you did keep track.
Yeah, I mean, it was a substantial amount of time, both for finance and the departments as well as for the city council as well.
So I hope that you'll consider the amount of time that the administration spent on it, the time that you spent on it, and if it's something that you want to continue, keep that in mind, that it'll block out other equally important things.
You know, from a purely business standpoint, which I approach a lot of things from, it's hard for me to imagine charging a fee and not knowing what the costs are, whether we cover the cost for the subsidized and just do business. So I think the budget committee by and large has been in favor of that, just for nothing else, just to know what our costs are versus what we're charging for the service. So from my standpoint, for example, one that we didn't ask for, but the energy department came up with the fees on connection fees and meters. Huge differences between what we were charging, what would be subsidized for solar, for example, and then what we're now charging, what we approved in our new fee schedule. Big differences. And so I think it's valuable. I know it takes time and effort, but just from a business standpoint, I can't imagine not doing that on a regular basis, knowing what the costs are versus what you're charging for.
That's a good example.
I believe you could have had the same outcome both in community development and in energy by simply asking the directors to take a look at their fees and make recommendations on which ones they would change.
Well, when it came to community development, the first go around, it really didn't offer more than 2 little tweaks, and we had to dig into it. We compared ourselves to other cities, and we ended up quite a big difference in the results by the time we were done. So I think it's valuable that the council will look at these things, like George said, and if there are, I mean, if we have a list of 300, you want to go through them all? Are we doing it alphabetically? By, what sequence? Or are there 25 that the administration thinks we really ought to look at for various reasons?
Mr. Hardy?
I agree that there's value to this exercise. I have to say, I had a lot of anxiety about not having our Southwest plan put in place. I don't know if anxiety is strong enough of a word. When you're getting these developments, we've been told for months, these things would come with the West Side Connector, and we have one on our agenda. And I'm going to feel pressure to move ahead just because people have spent a lot of time and effort on things that are already that because we don't have an updated plan, they're going on the previous communication. And so they're putting a lot of time and effort into these things because we don't have this plan ready. And now we're going to get things that may not be in our long-term best interest. I guess what I'm saying is I think this fee review will go a lot easier when we have 360 in place. And I wonder if it would be better to postpone this until then, so we can get these answers with less effort and put those efforts into things like Southwest plan and get that through as quickly as possible so we can have a direction. Because some of these decisions are being made and we can't undo these decisions. And so to me, I think it's about priorities and it's hard. Yeah.
It seems like the nexus with the west side though is because the administration brought forward the planning commission was, or the planning commission, but the planning department was a set of fees where we've given you the opportunity to bring forward whatever group of fees you would like to. We said as far as time frame goes, we did say 25 per quarter over a 3-year period. That was the original motion that the council made was 25 per quarter and did be completed in 3 years. And so, but then we did leave you the opportunity and the flexibility to decide whatever fees you wanted to bring forward out of the 300. And so I think it was unfortunate that it happened to be community development fees. At the same time, you're working on some things on the west side. And you know, the school moving could have been something we could have predicted, but I think the timing of that was more of the issue. I don't think we have to compare it to the west side as whether we do the fees or not. I think that was an unfortunate coincidence or, you know, decision to do community development fees at that point in time. Mr. Sewell.
Well, I just wanted to drill down on your comment, Mr. Honeymead, about Provo 360 saving time in the process. Could we get kind of a estimate on that? I mean, would that be a major time saver after we have Provo 360 in place, or is it just kind of?
I think that Provo 360 will give us some additional tools, but it's still going to take. It's still a lot of the work is the comparison. It's going to and reviewing the costs. True Provo 360 will help, but I don't know if it would be a huge difference in time as far as the impact by departments, but it's going to be a great tool to provide some benefits for them. You agree with that, Dustin?
I think if we prepared in the right way to track some very specific things, there would be a lot more valuable information gathered than the estimates that we've been providing. We could be collecting actual costs, but again, this would be on a highly predictive basis, and we would be tracking very specific things, but we would be able to get much better data. It would be, and while it might take the same amount of work, it would be, I think, more reliable information.
I've got great faith in our administrators and directors, and so I wonder, are they doing this anyway? Or are they know what their costs are, don't they? As far as running a program?
No, not initially. That's why we started this. We didn't know the total cost of the service that they were providing or the fee that they were charging.
I think there's lots of levels. So some are very simple, and ours simple as a product that we buy that we resell. And then some are far more complicated that involve multiple people's salaries and
No question about that. But they do have a gut feel. They would have a gut feel, wouldn't they? Or we just provided services without knowledge of that.
Yeah. You would have more than a gut feel in most cases, but where they become very complicated. So what does it cost us to respond to a traffic accident? We don't know the cost of that. But you can also see the time involved in calculating that cost. And will that change whether or not we want to charge for that service that we're offering? And that's not on the consolidated fee schedule, but there's many different levels of complexity to fees that we charge.
But you would know, you might not know what it costs to respond to an accident, which isn't on the fee schedule, but maybe if there was an ambulance, the ambulance, ride back and forth, they understand that cost.
Well, let me use this to point out that I think the error of the 300 and maybe not the things that are not on the consolidated fee schedule. I've never understood the difference between only analyzing the things on the consolidated fee schedule, and if it's important to know the cost, it shouldn't matter if it's on the consolidated fee schedule.
But that was the start. That was something that we could actually identify was 300, and we could actually work on those first, because it's going to take time to do that. And we did mention in those meetings as well that once we did what was on the consolidated fee schedule, then we could move to other things that you felt should be looked at as well. We had that discussion initially as well. Mr. Connect?
So it seems like the premise is that people should pay for service they get.
Where is that premise coming from? That one concerns me.
Well, I'll just put it out there, that as a general rule, I think most people feel it's equitable to pay for what you get. Now, we're going to be applying that soon through not developers, but multiple apartments, where they've been getting one charge per sewer. So we're going to change that, more in line with pay for what you get.
I call a policeman out to take care of some vagrants on my property. How much you going to charge me for that? And I'm getting a good service.
Okay.
Those are the things that we wonder about.
Okay, we went through this with community development fees. Virtually everything they were doing cost more to deliver than they were charging. Only in like one or two instances where they were really making money. And so it becomes our decision whether to charge the full price or not. And we often, in most things, we're subsidizing virtually every service we offer to everybody for everything. And the question is, so how close to 100% do we want to charge anybody for anything? And it's certainly with police and fire, you don't charge for certain things because it's just not done.
And why is it not done?
To have a policeman come out to your house for a call and then you have to pay.
Right, but there's a reason for that. It's done,
Public safety.
but it's done for a reason. And you could say, well, we are paying for it. I mean, I pay for it, we pay for it out of our property taxes and our sales taxes. And so whether it's Gary who calls, or whether it's me who calls, or whether neither of us but our neighbor does, we're all pitching in together because we're all protected by that police presence and the policing. And so just because something, when we call it subsidized, but are we subsidizing our police service, or we're just paying for it through taxes? We do it for our parks, and our residents just said, hey, we want to spend more on this, so we're going to tax ourselves more for parks and recreation and arts.
Right, but if we don't want to pay to reserve that pavilion or pay for whatever service we're getting, like the police, because we're paying for it on the property tax, we can get rid of all the fees and just off the property tax.
Right, and so I'm just arguing that it's complicated, and there's certain fees, there's certain services that I think we want to pay for with general taxes, and there's certain services that I think we want to pay through fees, and there's certain ones that it's going to be a combination of, and there's no right answer. It's just, or there's probably a right answer, but that right answer may be different for each service that we're providing, and we just need to ask that question.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's why we have the discussion, and why it's important to, once in a generation, go through and look at it.
I'm just looking at the police department fees, and I don't see where, I mean, they have visits, the first three, I think if it's a false alarm, there's no fee, the fourth response, there's a fee for it, the fifth is a little greater, sixth. So as far as accidents, if they were just on that's not included, that I can see. But, so some of this is philosophical discussion, you know, about other things that are not on the consolidated fee schedule. And I think the point right now is that we've asked to have an accounting of what our costs are, what is the city providing and at what cost? And is there a way that we can recoup, you know, more of that cost that makes sense in a business sense, to know what our costs are, what we can recover through those that are benefiting from the service? Does it make sense to have them pay more for the service they're providing than to have the rest of the, you know, the residents in our city subsidizing that for them for that particular fee? So, and like I said, this was going to be every quarter for 3 years, and it's already extended out. But we did take this back to the budget committee, and we met and we discussed whether or not this was something that, you know, the budget committee felt was important, and it was very strong. Yes, this is important to continue to understand what our costs are now more than ever, was one comment that we heard from the budget committee. But
I would like to know the cost of what we're asking here. I think that would be an important thing to ask. We're creating a cost, so if we're asking that, is that cost, how much is that cost? To do those questions.
Interesting. Could we just get a ballpark on the number of hours that we're investing in this?
And that would cost. I would love to hear that. That's the frustrating thing, is I don't know what we're really asking.
Let me add to that. I don't know if John has the number of hours would be substantial. Let me be very clear that the cost has been far in excess of number of hours. It's been employee morale. It's been quite a number of things that come along with this as well. And so as you evaluate this, it's not just the hours spent on it.
To me, and this would, part of this jargon comes from my interactions with the budget committee and you know, the economists and the papers that I read because of this issue, but it's the opportunity cost. Is the thing that I'm most concerned about is, you know, what are we not doing while we're doing this? And that to me is where my biggest concern is.
So there's really no employee cost because you're using current employees, and David's exactly right. They're doing this instead of something else. Because you're not hiring new employees, are we?
No, but we need to.
Well, I'm just saying we're not at this point. So it's really an opportunity cost. How important is this compared to what else could be done with those people's time, or are they just using time? They have a little extra time to do it. Let
me add in and your time.
What's that?
And your time.
Can't council time.
Yeah, because.
Well, our council time, though, basically, we'll decide today whether we want to use council time.
No, but it's occupied a substantial amount of your meeting time. And that's time you're not meeting on other issues. And so when the planning commission says to you an hour or so ago, what are you going to do on the west side? And you're all looking at each other because you haven't had that dialogue. That's because that dialogue gets pushed out because there's just not enough time to talk about all the issues that are to be talked about.
Because fees canceled, though. I don't think, maybe so.
We haven't done this we met that one meeting, 2 meetings with community development, but it is one of our top priorities to be fiscally responsible government, and so I think it's time well spent for some of Mr. Sewell.
Well, I'm just curious on the morale comment. Could you help us understand?
I talked to you about that, Dave, and public meetings aren't a great place to talk about it, but just know that you're impacting employee morale, and especially the Parks and Recs conversations.
So that we're considering changing the regs.
Yeah. Everything you say in a public meeting impacts people. And it's just a reality.
So we have this concept of budgeting for priorities and just being responsible and accountable and knowing how much you're spending and whether you're getting the money and what's the real cost. And so on that level, I think it's good to try to figure out the cost for services, and if it's appropriate to charge more. And sometimes you decide, well, it's not politically acceptable, or there's lots to talk about when you talk about adjusting fees up or down. But I thought it was valuable to see the actual cost for the services that community development was rendering, and then we said, well, okay, do we want to discourage people from doing this activity, and you know, raising the price may discourage that, and then we look at other cities like Orem, and we kind of benchmark it and go, well, you know, it's not going to be the end of the world. They do it there, and we can recover more of our real cost, and even then we didn't go to 100%. So I thought that was a valuable exercise. There may be some of those 300 that are not really worth our time, but which ones are? And that's the judgment call, which you said was up to the administration, to say, you know, which ones are really worth spending everyone's time reviewing, because they're just out of sync. They haven't been updated in so long, or whatever reason.
So what we ask what our directors to do is to look at those things. I hope they look at that at least once a year and say,
Well,
we're way off on this.
but that wasn't happening in community development. That was obvious.
But
They said they weren't very good. They actually said we weren't going to review our fees.
maybe that's the direction we should be going, is asking them to review their fees
But that takes time too.
to some degree. Yeah. I understand the conversation, and I understand the importance of cost, and I would like to know the cost of what this is going to require also.
If you approach community development, if you go back in time and approach community development, I think they change their mind about what they're willing to bring to you based upon what they learn you're willing to change your mind on or to approve. And so one of the best things you could do is set parameters in how you would like them to set their fees and what you're looking for. There's no better example than Public Works. You've changed millions of dollars of fees based upon the council's willingness to entertain what they're bringing to you. And that's millions of dollars, in community development was tens of thousands of dollars. And the louder you can send a signal to them about what you're looking for, the more likely you will see them come back to you.
So to follow up on that, if the council gave direction, like you're saying, to basically all the departments that are charging fees, and they on their own kind of internally looked at some things and said, well, yeah, we might want to change this or that, and then bring those changes back to us.
So I'm not proud of it, but during the last 7 years, more fees and utilities have been increased, than probably in the combination of the city's history. Now, I'm not sure I want to be bragging about that, but that's a reality. And my point is, they've been pretty aggressive about bringing new things. And sure, you can find little pockets where they have not. But overall, it would be hard to find an era where more has been brought to the council for upward movement.
Any other comments?
I was as part of the early discussions when we were meeting with the budget committee, and I know one of the things that we were looking at was our long-term budget and trying to make it more sustainable. And one of the areas that was discussed was user fees, and my understanding was that was at least initially what drove the idea of reviewing the 25 fees per quarter and going through and reviewing all our fees. And the only observation that I would make after reviewing the first 50 is that there really hasn't been a substantial change. My understanding is I think it was about $30,000 for the community development fees of additional revenue after we matched up with what Warren was charging, and then we didn't make any changes with Parks and Rec. And so my observation is from that perspective, it was a significant amount of time and effort for not a lot of additional revenue. That would be my own comment.
Well, Yes, if you look at it on a 1-year basis, but, often we look at it in a 10-year basis, and then it's 10 times that amount. Because if we don't update it now, in 10 years, we might have been charging the same thing. At some point, you have to review it, update it. And then going forward, you get that amount of money into the general fund or whatever, so it's more like 300,000 over 10 years.
That's fair.
So I think there's payback.
And the plan was to evaluate after 3 years and, to have all of them done by 3 years, in a 3-year period, and then to be able to really evaluate at that point. So we're, just a couple of steps into it instead of 4 steps into it. And it's hard to, I think it's hard to make a decision at this point, personally. So, other comments, questions? I would look for a motion to either change what we're doing or reaffirm what we're asking.
So let me ask, are we doing this once?
Doing what once?
This 300 fee assessment once, or are you proposing this as an ongoing thing?
And the original, and I don't have the original motion in front of me, but the original motion was to do all of the fees on the consolidated fee schedule and then to be able to evaluate those fees, those 300 fees. And then there was discussion about if the administration had other fees that they want that were not on the consolidated list, we could start looking at those at that point. So I don't think that the original motion was to have this continual, I think once we've defined the cost, I don't know what the plan was to go back to the first set. Is that what you're saying? And then go through everything again?
Yeah, I'm still looking for the cost figure of what we're asking for.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I'd really be interested in. John, can you help me anyway?
Well, and maybe starting now.
We
track
could, or
those
we could go
things.
back and review. Right now, though, I would be pretty much shooting from the hip, and I would rather have a little more substantial evidence. But I would just say that it's significant as far as the actual time. I don't have that ready today.
Mr. Stewart?
So it seems to me that it's clear there's some value in understanding our costs better, right? I mean, just coming as a businessman's point of view, we're trying to be efficient with our citizens' tax dollars. So there's definitely some value, but it's also clear to me that we're investing too much in this. There's got to be a more efficient way, I think, to achieve the objective here. And I haven't really got a suggestion for that, other than perhaps to ask, maybe ask the administration to come back with a proposal. I think you know what the goal is. I think would I be overstating it to say that you'd be supportive of understanding our costs better as long as we didn't invest too much into it?
I can't argue with the wisdom of knowing our costs, right? I mean, nobody's going to make that case. And I think in many cases we do. And our reality is that we don't set our prices like you do in the free marketplace. We set our prices based upon what services we want to offer in the community and what it takes to be able to offer those services in the community. And a lot of businesses would love that luxury, right, to be able to do that. And so I think what's happening is you're wanting these two worlds to collide, where all of us that have businesses and all of us that have common sense say, well, of course we want to know what things cost. But this is a city, and almost everything we do, because nobody else will do it. And that means you're going to be subsidizing almost everything that we do. As a matter of fact, when we get into areas where we're not subsidizing it, that's where we need to ask ourselves questions and know why we're doing it. Because maybe private sector would come in and do it. And I think what I'm proposing to you is, hey, great, if the council really wants to put this much time and energy into this, we're going to be supportive and we're going to do our best to accommodate that. But I have serious misgivings about priorities and about the time that's being spent on this. And all I'm asking for today is a reevaluation of that. And if you come back and say, well, after we reevaluate it, yes, this is where we want to spend our time, then great, we'll be supportive. And we'll figure out a way to make it happen the best we can. But I think it's important that you analyze that yourself.
I think we give the administration great latitude to choose, which ones you might feel that it's worthwhile to do, without impacting what's really important to the city, if in fact it's impacting. So I've always felt comfortable doing it because we gave them that kind of latitude.
I'm not sure that latitude makes any difference. The bulk of the work is coming from John's department, regardless of which fees we pick. And when you pick a specific department, they're all going to make a case that they're, that they're busy and have stuff going on too, and don't want to divert to do it.
Do we still have the same personnel in finance? We used to have Denise and Devin. Do you have replacements for both, or?
We do, we're fully staffed, we're fully staffed.
You are
right now.
fully staffed, you feel like you have adequate?
We have
staffing.
some new people that are still learning, but they're all doing well, and we're in a better place every day. Don't you think, Dustin?
Yeah.
Dustin's doing a great job, and so we are staffed right now. We're really, to say we're overwhelmed would be a little bit of understatement with Provo 360. Matter of fact, we're missing a meeting right now. As soon as we're done here, we're going to run in there to that meeting. It's taking a lot of our resources. We also are starting our audit, which, without Denise, which we're going to be fine, but it's a challenge, but we're heavily, but it can be done. We will, if council comes back and wants us to continue this program, we'll support it, but we are very busy.
So I would like to think, besides any money that we might be gaining by raising fees to appropriate levels, that we would also be gaining knowledge. If a department or an individual or whatever entity doesn't really know what their cost basis is, and they go through the process of determining that, that's not just a one-time event. I would think that would help them going down in the future to continue to monitor what's going on. So if it's a painful thing to do in the first place, it shouldn't be as painful going down the line, and it should bear fruit because you've established the parameters and the criteria and you have some perspective you didn't have before.
I'm going to propose that you just have your staff, myself and Bryce, meet with John and Dustin, and we'll figure out where we are in the process and identify some possible paths forward and bring that back to council in a couple of meetings and make some recommendations on where the process to do annually anyway as part of the budget to understand where your fees structures are. When we do departmental budget reviews, that'll be part of that process. And certainly anytime a budget or anytime a fee is recommended to change, we're going to want to identify what they're done. But I would suggest letting us sit down with the administration staff, and then come back to you with kind of a report of where we are and where we think we should go forward on that.
Mr. Smith?
I like that suggestion because I think what I'm hearing, the administration's in charge of administration and execution. I think what they're telling us is that this policy isn't being executed efficiently. And so let's see if there's a more efficient way to arrive at the goal.
Because it's us to approve fees, and we need to feel comfortable that the fees are fair and equitable. So I don't think it's unreasonable for the council to ask for information on something they have to make decisions on. But I agree it needs to be efficient, it needs to be I feel uncomfortable looking at fees and saying, I'm okay with these fees, but I really don't know in favor of the fees as the way they are. So it's really been helpful for me personally, when I approve those fees, to know that they've been looked at carefully and that we actually are making it more fair to the average citizen.
I guess a little bit of the struggle I'm having is, I feel we're making an assumption that they're not doing it under their normal practice of running their departments anyway.
Well,
But they're not doing what?
That they're not, Joe just mentioned that analyzing their fees and seeing if there's different cost recovery. I think some of that goes on by, as they prepare their annual budget.
It certainly does, but I don't think they do that. They did when I was mayor.
If it was really being done in that, to that degree, it should be just like, oh, here it is. But it takes a lot of effort to get there. So I question to what degree, like George said.
Could we set the direction and ask for 360 to be set up in a way that more easily facilitates that? I mean, we heard, you know, the cost of a swim diaper with this effort, and I wonder, do we really want to know what the cost of the swim diaper is, or do we just want to know that when they set the charge for the residents that it was taken into account? And so I wonder if with that 360, if then you can set it up so it rolls up easily into those operating expenses. A swim diaper?
You don't have it.
Swim diaper. Oh, I thought you said diaper.
A swim diaper.
He's thinking Olympics right now. He's on the Phelps and he's going after the gold right now.
That's right. I was watching diving this morning.
Oh, diving game, yeah.
Sorry.
It's good to smile once in a while.
Madam Chair, to Mr. Van Buren's point, directors are clearly motivated to maximize the revenue from fees. It allows them to supplement their programs, to do more. They also recognize, though, that you can reach a point of diminishing returns, where your fee is so high that you're now discouraging participation and therefore your revenue goes down. So I think you can be confident that department directors will always look at, just by the very nature of the budgeting process, they never have enough to accomplish their mission. And so they're always looking for ways to increase revenue. Now, the question may be, is a fee, are we charging a fee for a service that we shouldn't charge a fee for? Or is there a service we're offering that we should charge a fee for that we're not? Or is the fee, does the fee have unintended consequences? For example, I think we all recognize that the rec center daily membership, daily fee of $5, you could probably increase your revenue by taking that to $7. But you will exclude some patrons that currently go there because now they can no longer afford it. But in total, you may increase your overall revenue. So in that case, your fee has social consequences, not just financial consequences. You may discourage people from participating, even though your overall revenue may go up. Someone may look at the $7 fee and say, great, that's fewer people I have to bump into in the pool. I'm willing to pay $7 because others will not. And so you may actually increase your total revenue while decreasing your participation. But that may be a consequence you don't want. And I guess my greatest fear is we invest all of this time and energy in looking purely at the financial component of the fee, and we never address the policy question, which is, should we have it at all? Are there services we do that we should charge fees for that we're not? And are there social consequences associated with these fees? And that never enters into the equation. I think at some point it needs to. We have to ask that question, and if we put all of our emphasis into, exactly how many hours are spent and what that dollar is, do we burden it or not burden it with overhead costs? If the cost of a water meter goes up, you can be sure that the water department's going to come in and want a higher connection fee because they're not going to take a loss on a connection. So again, I think there are other elements to this fee discussion we haven't really talked about, but we've put, as John and Dustin suggest, a large amount of time and effort in only the financial component of the fee.
So I agree with you that we talked about the social costs, especially when we talked about the rec center.
Mhm.
We did discuss that quite at
Right.
length. That was the whole discussion was if we raise the fees,
Right.
then, participation drops off and then we ended up not changing the recreation fees for that reason.
Right.
So we had that discussion I thought that we did make a policy decision with the rec center because of that, because of the social costs or because of the loss of revenue. If you increase fees, you could actually have less revenue. And we did that very purposefully, I think, with the rec center fees. But do you think that your department heads would make their decisions differently about their fees if they understood their costs fully? Do you think that would?
I don't know the answer to that question. I do know it's a component. I don't know, in the 100% scale of issues we would consider, I don't know whether the actual cost of offering the service would be more than half, less than half of that consideration. I think their key consideration is how do I maximize my revenue? And again, that takes into account a variety of components. So I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if it would change their mind, I guess, to be honest.
As usual, Wayne is logical and well-spoken, and yet I would counter with the fees for community development where they were way under our cost and way under what Warren was doing. And we did have a discussion, do we want to discourage someone from getting that building permit for his basement? Or do we want to discourage somebody from being able to go to the Board of Adjustments and things like that? So you bring up good points, but I do think we are concerned about not just the financials, but the effect.
I guess the point I'm making though is all of our work that we do is financial. The work you do is policy and social, right? But if you ask those questions, despite the analysis that says we're losing money, and you come up with a different answer, then all the time we've spent trying to figure out those costs bore no fruit. Does that make sense? So I guess that's the point I'm hearing, is that we're spending hours and hours of time on a given fee to figure out exactly what it cost us over the last 3 years to offer that service. And in the final analysis, that made very little difference because it came down to the social questions and the maximizing revenue questions. And so I guess I'm asking, why don't we talk about that instead of going through the financial analysis? If that's what defines the decision at the end of the day anyway.
And I think we're sensing that almost without exception, that's how these fees are set, more than the cost.
And honestly, that's largely, in my experience with the fees in the city and going through this now for 13 budget cycles, I can tell you most departments will come in and say, okay, what do I have to do to get $20,000 more? And we'll always ask the question, well, what's in your control? You don't control sales tax revenues. You don't control property tax revenues. What do you control? And the answer is we control our fees. And so there will be a question asked, if it's in the police department, is $10 the right number for a fingerprinting card? Well, they're probably not going to go through an analysis to say how much time does it take a clerk to gather the fingerprints and print them and mail them and provide a copy. They're going to say, can I charge $15 and increase my revenue? And that will always be the question that's asked. So again, I guess the point I'm trying to make is, are we, with all of the factors involved in the fee structure, we're investing so much of our time in the financial slice, and we're not investing the level of time perhaps that the council invests on the policy question.
I'm smiling because if you think about motivations, and I'm selling a service, and I get the choice of raising that price up as high as I want, and I can decrease the amount of customers that come through my front door, and I'm not paid on customers. And so basically, I can raise the price this high, and guess what? I just get less customers. That are great motivations, right? And so if you had no good intent from employees, and they were simply trying to make their job as easy as they could, they'd raise their prices up to the top of the roof, and nobody would come through the front door. And my point is they're very in tune with the right amount to charge that I think is pretty in harmony with your with your policy decisions. And the best thing you could do is clarify your policy as to what you would like them to charge and give them that directive and then let them go see what they do.
How do we give that direction if we don't know what the cost of the service is?
Because you're assuming it's cost. What do you want to have happen?
That's
You want as many-
one of the pieces, though, that it is good to know. That's one of the pieces. And
I think what we're finding out,
said that that's something that, if we're going to go and approve the consolidated fee schedule, we want to know that is the,
I think we're finding out that cost has hardly ever impacted your decision.
We've had two sets of 25,
Right.
and they're very different sets of 25. And we've
Two
treated them
cases.
both differently. So I don't know how you can make that assumption because we've only had two sets of 25.
Because the cost, if the cost would have impacted your decision, you would have raised fees.
We did raise fees in the community development.
You raised $30,000 of fees and you looked at millions of dollars of fees.
And we
Overall,
raised more than what community development recommended, though.
overall, your decisions were made on policy, not cost. I don't think you can deny that.
I think cost as a consideration. Sure.
So what I found valuable, and I'm listening to what you're saying there, what I found valuable as a determinant factor was not so much the cost of the service that the community development was incurring, because in the end, we didn't recover 100% anyway. But what was the most valuable was how did we stack up to other communities? And it turned out that Warren became the benchmark. So with our other fees, another approach might be, instead of analyzing all of our costs on all of our fees, which I still think has value, look at other cities that have those same fees. And we can assume that they've done a certain amount of homework and that's kind of the going rate. And if we see some huge discrepancies in our fees, then we dig a little deeper and say, why? Which is kind of what we did with community development.
But I think when we talked to Orem, I don't know that they did this kind of analysis either. They wanted to know what we found out from our analysis.
No, but they have set fees right now.
Right, but they haven't gone through this thing.
But how do we know how they got to it? Is that a
Well,
Right.
example?
Well, and I'm just
benchmark we want to measure.
No, I'm just saying, when you see anomalies, that, we're a lot higher or we're a lot lower, that's when I raise questions and say, what's going on? So it gives you a place to start, a little bit of a reference.
And especially the social part of that, or that.
'Cause,
that, whether or not people are gonna stop coming because the fee is too high. If you're benchmarking with other cities in that way, that that people are still going, they're still building in Orem, they're still doing things. So I think that is a good
And
benchmarking something.
they're faced with the same dilemma. And they may be setting their same rates for the same reasons, which are more political than practical. So I say, let's compare ourselves to others and see what they're doing.
Well, this is where you do exactly that. You get your prices based on what your competitors are charging. So it's certainly a valuable component, without question. That's why we ask to compare to other cities, because it is a component that you have to know. What you shouldn't, because you don't have to, but you should know.
Just, I wonder how much longer we want to stay on this.
We do need to move forward.
But I heard earlier, that our departments will try to maximize revenue. My hope, and I think this was borne out in some subsequent comments, but my hope is our departments are trying to maximize their mission, trying to achieve their mission. And finances have a huge impact on that. We pay for these things either through taxes or fees. And so if we can recover more in fees, then we can provide more services. But the question I think needs to be on all of these is what is that mission, and how do they best optimize their fees to achieve that mission? So hopefully that's the main objective. And if we can communicate, and if, as long as the council feels comfortable that they understand what the mission is, it seems like we could give them the directive to, look at the fees and optimize them so that we're getting the best value, getting the best bang for the buck, that they're maximizing their mission with the resources we're giving them and what they can charge.
I'm just going to have to make this comment. One of the In a newspaper article, one of the departments was quoted saying, well, I'm gonna have to raise my fees because you're gonna reduce my revenue through the subsidy. So in fact, the department director was saying to me as I read that, I think the general public should help subsidize more of my fees than me charge my patrons a higher fee, which was interesting in light of Wayne's comment. I don't think they always are looking for, if they think they can get the money somewhere else from general revenue, they're not gonna raise the fees. At least that was what I got from the comment in the article.
I agree that there's a lot at play here, but it's possible that by raising their fees, kind of as Wayne pointed out earlier, by raising their fees, they may be able to increase the revenue, but they may be not achieving their mission.
And that could have been his motivation.
Yeah, okay, so that's why I think the long term, the overall thing we should be looking at, mission and providing public value.
Right. In the interest of time, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt Mr. Strecker's suggestion to give our council staff a crack at this, meeting with the administration folks and come back to us, say in a month or whatever, how much time you think you need.
Why don't you give us by October 1.
By October 1.
By the first meeting in October.
By the first meeting of October, and give us a couple of options of ways that they think we can meet our mutual goals in a more efficient way that kind of works better for both branches of government.
I'd like to second that and just add that if the administration would consider looking at RPs, comparing with other communities, shouldn't take a lot of effort. I think that would give us some guidance to then go further with certain fees.
That would be part of the process that I would suggest anyway. We would do a comparative.
That's great.
Because the reality is the vast majority, I mean, there's 60 pages of fees in the consolidated fee schedule. The vast majority of those are just little administrative things that you don't probably need to look at on a regular basis. I mean, annually, yes, but you don't need to sit there and compare them. You want to look at the ones that have, a real fiscal impact and whether or not they're calculated such as that they're recovering, and if not, why, which usually ends up being some kind of policy or social question. And then recommendations coming back to council on where to go with it. And I think if we can do that, I think we can find a way to achieve both aims, so that they're able to focus on the mission that the council's given them, but with respect to the fees, that we've also, there's an accountability for them as well. And I think that would be the process that I propose to go through.
So is that the motion clear to everyone? Should you restate the motion, Janine?
Restate it. Let me just get up here. Oops. Okay, so Mr. Sewell made a motion to suggest giving the council staff an opportunity to meet with the administration and then come back to the council the first meeting in October with a couple of options of ways that they could meet mutual goals for both the administration and the council. And then Mr. Connect added also as part of that motion to look at a comparison of other cities' fees.
Any conversation on the motion? Questions? Those in favor? We have first and
Mr. Connect.
Those in favor? Those opposed? So it's unanimous in the affirmative. Thank you. The next item of business is a discussion regarding the Interlocal Cooperation Agreement between Utah County and Provo City for Lakeview Parkway Project. This will be presented by Mr. Graves.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to come visiting with the council on this item today. We've previously discussed items related to the Lakeview Parkway project. This project is a project that went through the Mountain Land Association of Government project selection process back in 2014. It was selected by both the Technical Advisory Committee and the Fiscal Planning Committee as a project to move forward and be funded. The funding source for this project was out of the county sales tax, third quarter cent sales tax for Utah County. And this agreement that's before you today, the authorization for the mayor to sign that agreement for reimbursement for project cost from Utah County to the amount of, it's $6,617,000. The project has been designed. It's moving forward. Right now, it's in the early parts of property acquisition, and we'll continue to move forward as the funding is available. What this allows us to do by signing this agreement, it allows us to go to Utah County as we have project costs and for the city to be reimbursed for those costs. The agreement has been presented, was approved by the Utah County Commission, and they're awaiting city council authorization and approval from Mayor Curtis for us to be able to move forward with the interlocal agreement. Any questions?
Any questions from Mr. Graves? Mr. Peck?
I guess this is a simple, perhaps naive question. What is their motivation for helping us on this particular?
We're guys. We're good guys.
We're very deserving. As the projects go through the selection process, they're evaluated by the committees at MAG and then selected based on the merits of the project. And so it's a selection process that every 2 years we go through that process. Every city and county presents different projects, and then they're evaluated based on their technical merits by not only those advisory committees at MAG, but also by the MAG staff who also performs project ranking based on the merits of the project.
I'll only add one slight thing to that. We're here because of Dave and his team's preparation, their foresight, their understanding of how to get these grants and applying for them and putting these projects forward in a way that they get approved. So he wasn't going to say that, but I'll add that to what he's just said. A lot of this is on his shoulders.
He's a good guy.
He's a good guy.
I agree. Mr. Van Buren?
Can you remind me, Dave, MAG's funding, what's the source for their funding? Where does the money really come from?
This particular project funding for it comes out of the county sales tax money. So it's local funding. It doesn't have to go through a federal funding process. It's a different scenario, different process, depending on what the funding source. MAG has other funding sources. They have federal funding sources, a couple different revenue streams and federal funding sources. There's also state grants that you can apply for, but this particular funding source that was approved for this project is the county sales tax. And so associated with that, in that funding cycle, this project did not require, and these funds did not require any match from Provo City. So it's all money that's coming to the city, to the project, without any other match.
So to put that in perspective, what's the total cost of the road?
It's estimated about $6.5 million.
Of the whole.
If you include the entire corridor, it's probably $70 to $80 million.
And so Dave's not only been successful on the $6.5 million, but on that whole price tag.
Can I just make a point too that it says in the cooperation agreement that the funds will come from the sales tax revenue funds and/or the vehicle registration fee. So I just wanted to make that point too. Another push for fee, for the use of fees, for good. Mr. Harden?
So just to be clear, we're talking about this section of the corridor goes from the airport to Center Street. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It's this stretch here. Now, I don't know. I don't believe it affects the specific agreement that we're talking about now. I have heard that there's some concern about alignment of this, and I didn't know, are we having conversations on that elsewhere? Again, this item is about this agreement, but is there an opportunity to discuss those concerns?
This project actually began back in, I believe it was either 2006 or 2007. We went through quite an extensive effort in public information, many neighborhood meetings, meetings with city council, administration at that time, in looking at what would be the best alignment for that. There were several alignments considered. There were 3 options that were actually recommended for further considerations. They were taken back to public meetings as well. There was public hearings at the Planning Commission, and then at the City Council level. It was determined at that time that the alignment, what the alignment would be, and then money was actually allocated through the same funding source for design of that project. And so we actually have final design plans for the project, and that's why we're at that point where property acquisition can actually move forward, because the final design has been determined at this point in time.
With your design, did you learn anything that changed your opinion on the alignment? Is there things that you have learned through the process that said, oh, maybe if we would move it here or here, that would be more cost effective, or we would achieve more of our goals? Or is there anything that stuck out to you?
There were things during that alternative selection process that, that had advantages or disadvantages. Cost being one of those things, but when we put all of that information together, the alignment that was selected made the most sense.
It still made the most sense. And then you went ahead and designed.
Yes.
During that design process, probably the chosen route, did you learn anything that made it more difficult, or say, well, maybe we didn't look at everything appropriately, or you still feel very confident?
No, I feel confident in the design. I mean, there were items that were discovered that need to be addressed in the design process, but nothing that said this was the wrong decision.
And this is something that's amazing to me, is that we are, with this road, we are setting policy. And we're determining, because if we want it to be agriculture, why in the heck are we putting this type of road through the farm? And so we're making decisions right now, even by not making decisions, it seems. And so we need to really have a strong look at this and see, is this the policy that we want? I think we're going. You created our policy.
Yeah,
You're a little late.
And I think that decision was made, 8-10 years ago.
And I agree.
Mr. Stewart?
Why is there such strenuous opposition by some people to your alignment? And when was the last decision made on the alignment?
I don't have the exact date of the council resolution. I think it was about 2008.
So the current alignment that's being contested by some of our people that own land in that area was approved by resolution in the 8th, 6 years.
In approximately 2008, yes.
Yeah, we got the warning earlier about, being careful what we say in open meetings or whatever. Let me just state it this way. I believe I've heard potential pending litigation, and I just didn't know if the administration is aware of that, if the council leadership's aware of that. Are we going to have opportunities to speak about this in a closed session, or?
If in the property acquisition process for the project, it's determined that we're unable to negotiate a settlement with a property owner, that would come back to the council in a closed session.
So I just had a question, since the property negotiations haven't been completed and we're authorizing the funding, are they actually going to start building the road in the uncontested portions, or how does that work? Or do you have to get all of those?
Now, typically, we want to go out and have all of the property for the project to be able to move forward before we start construction. There is an instrument that they call a right of occupancy agreement that some property owners are willing to sign, which essentially says, I'm giving you the right to go ahead and occupy my property, but we haven't negotiated out the final cost for the property.
One last clarification then. In the event that the negotiations fail, then you would be asking for an eminent domain proceeding. And either or both of those things have to be completed on all the sections before construction starts.
Yes. And all of those things are project costs. All of this acquisition process, the appraisal process, and all of those costs are reimbursable through this agreement, through these funds. Without that, if we don't sign this agreement, all of those costs fall back to the city.
Mr. Jones?
Mr. Stoll, I just want to clarify that. I think this is probably clear to everybody, but I'll just reiterate that when you say the eminent domain proceedings have to be complete, what that means is that the authorization to go down the eminent domain road has to have been obtained from the council. But as Mr. Graves pointed out, part of that process can be that you get a right of occupancy. I mean, you could, just so we're all clear, you could potentially have a trial 3 years after the road is built about the value of the land. But the authorization to be able to take the land has to be presented to the council before the project can go forward.
Are there any other questions? So, as I was reading through it, I just under terms, number 5, section 5, and then number 1, design and construction. First sentence was a little confusing to me, but as I'm reading it again, I think you meant bid out as a word. So that the city will obtain the necessary right-of-way design, bid out, and management of the construction of the highway, rather, or were you trying to say the city will obtain the necessary right-of-way design, bid out, and manage the construction of the highway? I don't know. Anyway, if you want to look at that sentence and just see the reason.
This is actually the county's agreement.
Oh, it is? Okay. We'll leave it on.
And so I mean, we can certainly review and recommend any.
Just as long as it makes sense to you.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a little awkward. I get what they were saying, but it was just a little awkward language, and I don't know if they meant bid out as a single term, and maybe that's what it is, because it makes sense that way now that I'm reading it.
English teacher.
Is that, well, yeah.
I think, as you stated, that's the intent.
Okay.
That's why I prefer serial comments, but not all.
Yeah.
Apparently the county doesn't. Yeah.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Graves? Okay, thank you. The next item of business is going to be introduced by Robert Mills, who's a planner, and this is Alan Graves representing Monterey-Ellis LLC, requesting zoning map amendment of approximately 15.23 acres, located at approximately 965 south, 1600 west, from the A1.1 Agricultural Zone to the R1.8 Single-Family Residential Zone. The rezoning would facilitate the development of a 50-lot single-family subdivision.
Good afternoon. So yes, the applicant has proposed to put in a subdivision on 1600 west, and this property is currently zoned at 1, so there's a 1 acre minimum requirement, and the applicant is proposing to put in a 51 lot subdivision And so this action is for a rezone to R1.8, so 8,000 square foot lots. Bryce, I don't know, can you put the map up? Sorry. Kind of, or at least the slides. And while he's doing that, I'll just give a little bit of background. The property consists of 4 parcels, and it totals about 15.5 acres of land. And just to give a little bit of context, it's kind of right in the middle between 890 South and 1150 South, so in that area. Currently used for farmland, but thank you. If you could just scroll down to the that one right there. So this gives location area. The thing that I wanted to point out was it is currently zoned ag, but the general plan for this area, for this entire area, is actually residential with a density of no more than 4 units to the acre. So when you do the math, the 51 units on this 15.5 acres comes out to just over 3 units to the acre. So this development, if the zoning was approved and to move forward, it would be consistent with the general plan policies for this area. The staff had an opportunity to review this application, and this has been going on for a long time. There were several concerns with infrastructure in this area, specifically regarding storm drain. The applicant has actually been in ongoing discussions with the Public Works Department and has been able to come to a resolution of those issues and things like that, to the point where the Public Works Department felt comfortable allowing a recommendation of approval to come before the council. The staff also recommended approval of this policy and zone change. To give a little bit of background on the Planning Commission, there were several members of the public that attended Planning Commission, neighbors, and so forth. Most of those neighbors were actually supportive of the nature of the project for this area to become a single-family subdivision with homes a minimum of 8,000 square foot lots. The concern arose mostly from the anticipated use of 1600 West, any possible traffic that would incur from this and other developments. The applicant did perform some traffic studies. Those are submitted, and Public Works had the opportunity to review those and determine that this project wouldn't necessitate an increase of the entire road. The applicant will be improving their area of, or their frontage along 1600 West to the proposed lane, to the proposed width that the Public Works has required, which is 72 feet, right? Yeah, so 72 feet of road right of way. And then also along 890 South, which it's currently over here, it stops, 890 South stops right here, and then the applicant would improve along here. So eventually, if this area continues to develop, that there would be a road that would go straight through there as well. Yes.
So 1600 West is currently designated a local or a collector?
So on the traffic management plan, it's designated as a collector.
And are any of the homes in this project going to have driveways backing out onto that street?
In this project, no. Actually, if you can scroll down a little bit. Sorry.
On this outside, it looked like there were some alternatives. Those bottom four.
Oh, these
properties?
ones, yes. These ones. So there would be some, and when we talked to Public Works, from my understanding, Dave, and the other Dave isn't here, but that was acceptable. In the original proposal for this, and this is what the latest iteration of what this subdivision would look like. The applicant had actually had a cul-de-sac here, and but based on policy that we have, we prefer connecting streets rather than cul-de-sacs, and so they were able to make those adjustments so the lots line up better and that type of thing. Bill?
On the issue of 1600 West, the lot you see in blue is a storm drainage lot, so it's not a building lot. The lot above that is an existing house that the property from that house is going into this development. So there's a house there now, and of course that accesses 1600. The lot north of that would access 1600, but the lot north of that would access the side street. So one additional. One additional.
And so, and then there are existing homes along here, along 1600 West there.
That road on the far north, what would the address of that road be?
890 South.
And does that continue through or does that stop?
Currently, no. On the other side, 890 South is just a very small road currently that comes and connects to this property right here and then goes out to 1100 West. And so the anticipation is since this entire area is currently in the general plan as residential, it's anticipated that residential uses would continue around here, and the applicant has actually submitted kind of a preliminary possible way that the area could develop. Extension of 890 South, so that one would go all the way through. Also, there would be possible connection to 1150 South, which this project will actually have utility services that will go through and connect to 1150 South.
Was that the right of way that they acquired?
So
right there?
Actually, currently the right of way that they've acquired is actually on 1600 South.
Down below?
Yes.
And why did they acquire that?
Requirements that Public Works had was that they'd be able to connect to the storm drain that would eventually go to the Lakeview corridor. And in order to do that, they needed to obtain right of way all the way down to that area. And so they were able to do that. They were able to negotiate an agreement with those property owners, and that has been made available to the city so that will kind of facilitate the future growth if that is the policy of the city to continue to grow out there, and so that they've made that connection.
Does 16th West connect to the Lakeview Parkway currently?
Currently, no.
Not yet.
Where does
the anticipation is that it will.
Okay, and where is it? Where does it end currently?
So 1600 West currently ends right here at 1150. Okay.
So that connection out to the airport road, is that one that we are going to make proactively or wait for developers?
My understanding from Public Works is that it would be development driven.
After being a couple of the meetings with the neighbors on this, the concern I still have, and I don't know if it's kind of had a good answer yet, is the safety issue having to do with 1600 as it goes north. As 1600 is improved, the properties that are existing now don't allow for the width that the collector has to be without some new things. Is that correct?
That's correct.
There's no sidewalk, there's no curb gutter, it's just a country road. The concern of the neighbors is that we're bringing 51 families into this development, and most likely they'll go to Sunset Elementary School, which is just a
16. Sunset Elementary School is right there.
They're very concerned about the safety of the kids on the side of the road, because the road now is just a 2-lane road without improvements, and we're going to drop 50 more families in there, and they don't know how that will be taken care of. So I'm not sure if we're putting a burden on the city to improve that before developers improve it, or I don't know what the answer is, and I don't know if we've figured out what the answer is.
Correct. I will, Bryce, if you scroll down a few, almost to the bottom of this one, the developer actually, the applicant actually proposed a kind of a goodwill type of solution to this. Yeah, if you keep going, these are some images. This is Footprinters Park, a little bit further down. Sorry, a little bit farther. And this is currently 1600, almost to the end. Sorry. These are types of homes that the developer or that the applicant has done in the past. Okay, right here. There's a goodwill kind of action the applicant proposed, contributing funds to the city and to the Public Works Department to improve this area. And I'm sure that the applicant is here as well. And this evening, I'm sure he will go into this in great detail. But just to give you an overview, that 1600 West could be restriped currently to add, these would be 12.5-foot lanes and then a pedestrian path that could be striped rather than improved. So it's not the ideal, but it is a situation that would allow a bit better situation than is there currently.
So the asphalt wouldn't be any larger, just be striped.
Correct.
With a path on the 8 feet.
And Dave can probably answer that question.
Not actually correct. The asphalt would need to be widened up. But we have gone out and taken a preliminary look at that. There appears to be room. There's two small utility poles that would need to be modified and relocated. But it appears that we could get that 5-foot path all the way from development up to 6 feet south where the school is.
There was some concern on the neighbor's part that they didn't want to have to give up property for a sidewalk. They wanted the safety, but it didn't seem like they were willing to give up property
That's
for
correct.
a sidewalk.
So at some points on 1600 West, as you get closer to 6 South, there are some fence lines that come almost to the road itself. And so in order to fit something like this in there would have to be obviously some negotiation or something. And the Public Works Department obviously is taking care of that and looking into that.
So can we go back to an overview of that parcel?
Sure. Bryce, can you help me out with that? Like this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you've got other properties to the southwest that currently have nothing. The southwest, the other side of the road, yeah. So you've got that really doesn't have anything on it. Then you've got properties just to the south in general that between there and the airport road that could develop. So
long-term, it's designated as a collector. You're going to have potentially hundreds of homes developed in the area and all want to go north-south on the existing road. So what plans do we have to make that into a real collector? Because it's certainly not that standard now.
Maybe I'll ask Dave to answer that one.
This 1600 West project is on our capital facilities plan, or capital project plan, but its funding has not been identified for it. It is also on the impact fee facility plan, so it is eligible for impact fee funding. So that gives us an opportunity if we have money in that fund that we could go ahead and do some roadway widening. It could be a project that the council may say, this is a priority project as we go through the budget process and say we need to start allocating funds. Might take a year or two to construct the road from 1150 South out to Lakeview Parkway.
So are you going to need to buy up property and buy up homes or just property?
There's no homes south of 1150 South, but it would require acquisition property.
The existing homes,
Well, yeah, if you go all the way to 6 South, there's, I don't remember the number of homes, I want to say 3. Yeah, it might be a little higher than 3, but there are a number of homes. The way those homes have developed along that existing roadway, there's just not adequate room for that collector road between both homes. And so we went out and did a preliminary alignment for a collector road, kind of the best fit with the existing homes. And there were a number of homes that would potentially be impacted if we developed that street to the full width.
And I think this is an example of why we need to get a plan in place, a local roads plan as well. I think that kind of bit us with the Spring Creek proposal, is we didn't have a local roads plan in place. I think we need to, we've got some of these things on the plan, but we need to reconfirm that we're committed to that and start purchasing the right of way that we need for the future width of these roads. And I would say not just collectors, but I think if we allow these, 90-acre blocks, kind of just to be developed piecemeal, and it talks about this in the neighborhood plan that we have in the staff report. This needs to be developed with kind of a broader picture. If we can have some local roads in there that's beyond the collectors, and that might give the school children a way to get up to 6 South in the school without walking on the collector. If we have some of these other local roads, and then it's not a question of, well, you've now planned out your development, but we'd like some connectivity. It's, oh, you want to develop here, that's fine, and you own this part and this person over there owns that part. That's fine, you can develop however, but there's a road scheduled to be here. You have to put this road in, and you have to lay out your development the way that this road's going to be here. So, and the more houses that go in, individual plots along the roads, and the more these developments go in without this overall plan, the harder it is to have that longer range order and mobility and connectivity that I think we desperately need there for quality of life.
So I totally agree with what you're saying there, Dave, and it just seems like we have to strike a balance here between the city doing a collector road and which is really in response to development, how much the development might contribute to that road. I mean, it's one thing to throw money at it, striping and a little bit of asphalt, but that's a long way from being a real collector road.
And so they would improve it to collector road standards along their frontage.
This might be just a down the road kind of thing. We can't really see above once you just pull that down at all. But is there an opportunity for a trail system, from the backside, from the east side of this development up through here? Yeah, I mean, it's through probably several parcels of property, but I know that we have in my neighborhood a trail system that goes from street to street to street because there were no homes there. They just created these trails. When we moved in, we actually kept the trails and built stairs, and so the kids could cross from street to street through our yards instead of on the streets. And so I don't know if there's some sort of
if there's an opportunity
for a trail system of some sort to get to there, because it's really just fields until you get to 6 South, right?
There are homes along here.
Yeah, the homes that are right,
I think that's another perfect example. Trail system. That's something that only works if you have a broader vision. If you were to, this developer puts a trail system on there, and the next one wants to do a different place or whatever, we won't have a trail system that's functional. That's something that has to be done at a broader view.
I guess final question, if we have to actually buy out homes, which is an expensive proposition, does that cost all fall to the city? Or does it get shared in any way with those that develop?
If we were to wait for other properties to develop north up here or south of here, you know, it's likely that much of that cost would fall back to development. If we say, you know, we can't wait, it's, you know, it's something the city feels is a priority, we need to go in and initiate this process and build the project, cost would fall. So,
Be reimbursed later when those future developments come in?
I guess, well, the reimbursement, at least to me, and maybe Brian or others might want to chime in. To me, reimbursement would be whatever impact fees are charged to future development. This would be kind of a form of reimbursement.
Or if we purchased the whole lot, they'd have to increase the frontage and they could buy the lot as incorporated into the.
Might be some kind of cooperative. So,
Currently, David mentions in the planning report that it can handle the traffic from this.
yes, as far as
current
being
road.
able to physically handle the traffic on the road, it's fine as a 2-lane roadway. It's well below our environmental threshold. I think the concern, as it was related to me, was more about the pedestrian issue and pedestrian safety, particularly between the development and the school at 600 South.
Are there other questions from Mr. Mills? Mr. Mayor?
Just mentioned, I've been pretty quiet. I think Curtis family owns 10 acres on the west side of the street. So we just lay that out there so you know.
Thank you. So we can take a break now, or we can, ready for break, and then do the next item. Can we do a little break?
5 minutes? Okay, let's come back in 5 minutes. Ivory Homes requests an ordinance amendment to section 14.49E.050 to allow a maximum front yard setback of 30 feet instead of 22 feet as currently required for the Broadview Shore development located at approximately 1300 to 2000 North Geneva Road in the SDP 5 zone. And Brian Maxwell is here to present this item.
Thank you. If you recall, this item was approved as celebration back in 2009, I believe, and it was revised through Ivory into a project plan. This area here on the left shows that layout. The one on the right is a blow up of this area. That's the current phase that's under construction right now. With the approval of the development, there were design guidelines adopted as well as part of the ordinance. And so it really involves an ordinance amendment to vary something that's listed there. As we went through the proposals, we found that there was a clause, or at least a section in the ordinance that stated that there was a maximum setback for a home. Besides the minimum you have, this also had the maximum distance the home could be back. The reasons for that principally were its design goes to try and push porches up to the front of the home and recess garages as much as possible. And so that was kind of set up that way. However, as Ivory went through design guidelines, they've shown plans that showed the homes, and we get into calling some of those snout homes, you know, where the garage sticks way down from the main home. And this shows a couple of examples that are currently in the city. And this shows some from their plan book, which are kind of the ones that have the largest distance between the living room and the garage. And so these would not qualify under the ordinance. And you can see that some of their models, you know, are pretty obvious that way. We get some that get a little bit closer, but the whole idea is that principally the requirement now is the garage has to be 4 feet behind the front of the home. What they're requesting is that be changed to allow the garage to be within up to 4 feet in front of the home. So it's like an 8-foot difference. The feeling, you know, they've got a lot of homes, a lot of styles. And I think probably Sherry's in some of those with you tonight. They have some other slides, but there are some very attractive homes that they're building in that area that do have a garage up closer, do have, you know, a minimum offset in that direction. So it'd principally be in villages 1.5, 1.6, 1.8, 1.10. These are basically the lot sizes through that area. And it would change it to have a maximum front yard depth of 30 feet from the property line to the main home. And then garages still stay that same distance, which keeps a 20-foot distance behind the sidewalk to the garage so that it allows adequate parking. Any questions?
Any questions?
The new high school is right across the street to the south from this phase.
Oh, it is. Okay.
We go back. High school's right here.
Okay.
So is this affecting the whole development or just what one?
It would. All of the areas that are yellow, orange, basically, and the white. The white's the 10. This is the 8. This is the 6. And so it would affect those areas. You know, it's not just this phase, but it would lap into the other ones as well. Our last change we had, and we're trying, Ivory, I think they feel a little guilty because here's 2 in a row, and how many more changes? You know, that's a question the neighborhood has. Is, are we going to keep changing things to, you know, make Ivory kind of fit their homes rather than the other way around? But the idea is this one probably would have been proposed at the same time, but they realized that the other one dealt with setbacks on the sides that were offset because of easements, and we changed that a little bit so that they could be a little more even. But this one definitely, you know, is the idea of what does the front of the home look like. If you look at a lot of their models, there are porches, but it's not an emphasis of their home. You know, I think it's not a daybreak situation.
But is that what was intended with the original ordinance? Was something that was more porch emphasized?
That was our reading of it. Yes, it was purposely put in there to try and have that porch and have that garage recessed.
I mean, when I'm looking through the pictures that are part of the packet, I gotta say, you know, the ones that are porch emphasized, I mean, being on the council, I'm trying not to just let my own personal biases, but I sure like them a lot better. And then from my reading of what was in here originally, I mean, it sounds like this was the intent, and now we're making changes that move away from that intent. And I mean, I noticed one other thing is, you know, it used to be the garage could be here, the front needs to be here, and we didn't even just swap them, but we said, okay, the garage can still be here, but we're going to move the house back. And again, that's a step away from the intended product, which was this more walkable. So what was the staff recommendation on this?
Well, one of the problems we found, and again, to go back, I think what we found is a lot of that wasn't as memorialized as probably we had hoped, in a sense, like garages, for instance. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on some other items, but I don't think anybody intended 3-car garages and massive garage fronts on the homes. I think that's what we're trying to get away from. But there was no language that was put into the text of the ordinance that said, no, your garages can only be a certain percentage of your front, or they have to be recessed, or anything else. Nor was there anything that required the porch, you know, a certain size porch or depth or anything that way. And it's almost like one of those things, you know, the devil's in the details. If you don't have that called out, and there's no way to really hold anything to it, it kind of blows it up, you know, in a way. And so that's why, you know, we didn't want to totally go where, yeah, pull the garage anywhere you want. You say, what's, you know, reasonable for at least that style.
Yeah. But one thing we could do is we could not agree to this amendment, and then the garage at the very least, I mean, it might be a 3-car garage, but at least it's recessed behind the front of the house. So I agree, it'd be nice to memorialize some of that rationale, but we at least have some hard codes, some hard ordinance here that would at least keep us in that direction. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kent?
So they're not coming up with any new house plans. They are going to use existing plans that they use elsewhere, and so they're not coming up with any new plans that meet these criteria for this area.
They did have some plans they developed for this area, but they weren't specific to that garage depth. You know, some of those even had the garage up a little bit, but there were some they showed when we did the side setbacks that, you know, illustrated the garage up. And it's something, you know, we didn't even think of there. We were thinking of side setbacks. And, but they did develop those specifically for the site, but not for the ordinance.
And did they comply better with the vision than what they're now advocating?
I don't know if it's better in that sense. There are some that I think still meet some of the intent, and some of it becomes a personal taste, and that's what's going to be hard. You know, there's some garages that are even with the homes that still emphasize a front porch and look great. The position that I think is almost like Dave Harding said, the position of the garage sometimes isn't so much as where the front of the home is in relation to the sidewalk. That's actually what kind of makes it more walkable. When the home starts going back, then it starts emphasizing that garage part. And so the problem we have is, you know, we've always had the requirement at least 20 feet on the driveway for the car to park in there. And so that's where we're kind of stymied on this. We can't really move everything up to take care of it that way. But the looks, it's hard to say exactly what that amount of garage recess or even overlap is, because it's different for each individual. And coming up with a consensus is you know, what the last one tried to do, and the existing ordinance does try to do, is with that 4 feet. And you know, that's where we are now.
So there's no parts of any of the subdivision that would lend itself to having a garage in the backyard, for example?
Yeah, the narrower lots were always, I think, intended that. I think if you go back to some of the meetings and obviously where they're trying to follow some of the existing developments, and again, that's my interpretation, is the idea was to try and get recessed garage. But there are some areas that actually look for alley loads, which, the way you do that is your garage is in the back. So there are, there was a call out to have alley loaded streets up, and there's, you can see one in that area. I don't think this is as extensive as the original development had or some of the intent, but a limited area of alley loads. Certainly some of these could be converted to that. It doesn't preclude that at all. But short of alley loads, certainly a drive that goes back from the front to the rear of the home or something. Narrow lots, and again, we'll probably talk about this a little bit later, but that's some of the intent. I think for the narrow lots, it's not a garage emphasis, it's just a traditional front porch emphasis.
So what was the staff recommendation on this? Sorry, I can pull this up, but.
I'm trying to think how we did recommend. I don't have it in front of me. I think, we felt that we could support it in the sense of a limited area because, again, there wasn't an emphasis on the porch, that you have a certain size porch or anything else. It does have the porch and some call outs in the design manual, but in looking through the adopted design standards that really are almost verbatim of the code, it was taken from that and kind of the pictures put in. It didn't seem like we really had a strong of an area to point to. And so, we left it open, I guess, if you want to get to that, to say, if it went way out on these other homes, then I think we would have had, this is definitely way over the line, or at least it seems obvious to see that. And even some of these, like we said, where they had that and not really a porch at all, it's a door landing for the door coming out. And that's why I said those don't seem to fit that style at all. This one, we do have a covered porch coming out. You can see that where the garage isn't, is dominating. I think it's probably more the 3-car garage we're more concerned about than the 2 cars in some situation, to be honest with you. But it's a method of how you look at something and not be pulled to the garage right off the bat. How can you see the whole house rather than just that?
Part of the staff presentation says there's nothing wrong with amending the ordinance so long as it maintains or improves the original product.
Right.
Is that the idea that this did or did not maintain?
Well, the planning commission, yeah, I guess that's the judgment part of it.
Yeah.
The idea is if you can always get at least as good a product or better, then, we're still ahead. It's just that if we feel that it's sliding backwards, that's where we say, it's an adopted ordinance, it's something that's always been there, something that, they would have been aware of as they purchased the land. And, there wouldn't necessarily be the need to go backward.
So when you say the 4 feet from the porch?
Right, so the frontmost part of the home, however.
The frontmost part of the home, so the porch is set back in, it's still the frontmost part.
Right.
And so, as I look at that plan there, that's more than 4 feet.
That one is, I apologize. I'll go find some other ones tonight, some that are closer to show you those other. We have some other ones with planning commission. I apologize because I thought they're on this slide, but I'll add those in so you have those.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
The next item of business was tech development requests a code amendment to sections 14.21A.070 and 14.21A.080, reducing the minimum story height in the DT1 general downtown zone and changing the application of the transition standards. And this will also be presented by Mr. Maxwell.
As the courthouse developed, we had a particular situation occur with Juice and Java, the restaurant that used to be there. And in looking for a location for them, economic development had the site that's, if I can get to it, might be easier. This shows the DT1 zone. This is the courthouse area here. And we're talking about at this particular site, Smith's is here. Here's the old Sears and the power building. But looking at the site, it seemed impractical to them to really build a second story just because that's a requirement. They're still in narrow use, it's still kind of isolated, just the nature of it. And so staff studied that sort of a situation. We found a couple of things. There's one, we have areas of transition where you have mixed uses on blocks. It's kind of shown on these edges where you've got like an RC zone, residential, and that goes to the DT1 versus the core area where the entire block's in the DT1 situation. And in looking at those, some of the transition requirements are already there, which said within 60 feet. And then we also added into that really a market condition. A lot of the reason you go 2 stories and bigger is because of the ground value. It's worth it to go up instead of out. Certainly the core area we felt was more protected, but the smaller uses that could go in and that really aren't expensive to take down would probably be justifiable until the market, caused a replacement. You'd hate to go big and then try and tear that down and look for someone to absorb those costs in their structure. But as long as the structure is a certain size and short and really not expansive, then probably we could turn that over to market situation. And much like one of the other conditions we did a couple of years ago dealt with the commercial on the first floor. We didn't get rid of the requirement for commercial on the first floor, but we allowed them during the time of transition that they could use it as residential and everything else, but make sure that it was built so that it could transition back to commercial when the retail market was there. And so for that reason, we recommended some particular things on this one that did allow a 1-story building that you could have the 12-foot floor, having a 14-foot floor. Didn't seem as critical unless you had the second story. And then said it's only related to the city blocks, which also include properties within an RC, R1, or Pro R zone. R2's crossed out because we don't really have those anymore. And then the same thing with it had a gable roof that's still required. We didn't change that requirement.
And you took out the 60 feet because?
It's a transition where you'd have gabled roofs on the residential instead of usually flat roofs. And so it allowed a little bit smoother transition in those areas. So anything within 60 feet still needs some kind of a thing, gable transition. But the heights would be different, than the 14-foot requirement go down to the 12. The transition area allows 1 to 3 stories in that area. Examples of the transition would be across the street here even, where we got off this corner where you've got a commercial for the first couple of lots along this edge up here. And you can kind of, picture that one a little bit, I guess, as the close nearby one if you can't think of what the other ones look like. But
so we're not changing that, we're changing and giving the opportunity for a single story to be 12 feet rather than 14.
Right. If it's more than that, then they need the 14 stories where 2 stories or higher.
So if they build it
or 14 feet
to 12 feet, and then they want to build on top of it, then they would have to raise the ceiling to 14 before they build a second story.
Right. Somehow incorporate it into their building or do something to make it look like it was that height. An example of that would have, it wouldn't be in a transition area, but we had the one restaurant that was, we know about these things, but you probably have never seen them, but we had one apartment building that was proposed and close to construction. There's a restaurant next door. It's always this idea, how does that eventually get incorporated into the project? Because it's a single story. And so that's where we talked about ways to do that. Is it a tear down or you allow just building over the top or something else? But I think we tried to stick to that. That once we go up, we really in certain areas where you have that retail on the first floor, especially, we needed to maintain that because then it'd just be too expensive to ever go back and redo it once it's built.
Right, so if we change this to 12, then we're kind of putting ourselves in that position of not being able to go 14 unless we do major.
Yeah, the thought here was that it's probably a tear down just because of its size. It's just not worth incorporating into another project.
In this one specific.
In this one specific
Is
one.
that open up the,
can of worms for other areas in the zone?
That's a good question, because it's at what point if somebody came in, or a Smith's building that's 1 story tall, how do you deal with those things, and how do you work those things into it? And I think it's an ongoing question we need to keep looking at it and revise this, as need be that way. If there's really a concern that something would be too big, maybe restricted to square footage or something that way, that, you can't build a 1-story building over so many square feet.
Can you point out where Juice and Java is trying to locate?
We're here, and now they're going right here.
And we really don't feel, I'm looking at Old Center Street, and obviously dynamics have changed since then, but on Old Center Street, they built the 2 or 3 stories knowing that, well, okay, right now there's nothing next to me, but there will be, and it was to build compact, so it was more walkable. It feels like there's so much that's going in just a block away. There's going to be a huge 14-story courthouse a block away, less than a block away, and we know some of these other things that are coming. It seems to me short-sighted. If it was just this one, that would be one thing, but I'm afraid that this goes in, and then the next person that wants to go in, well, they're 1 story, we'll go, and it sets the tone for that area, where I think if we say, these requirements have been in place and we're just going to stay with them, then maybe it delays it a little bit, but I think that commercial demand is there sooner than later, and we just directly to the next step rather than taking a lot of baby steps to get there, because I fear that it may stall those future steps by putting investing in things that are not up to the standard. But sorry.
I'm trying just to comment Juice and Java.
Yes.
Isn't that really what's happening here?
Well, it is
a special situation.
Yeah, we did look at other situations, other businesses that could do the same thing, the small ones, like if a small, again, very limited to like 3,000 square feet maximum or something. And what type of other uses could you have that go in there? Small restaurants or something else. But again, it's one that if they have to develop a lot of parking, a lot of other development area, the cost is going to be too great for I think really what they would obtain. Juice and Java really doesn't require the parking because it's more of a drive-through and very little. And I guess, and again, it's all philosophical, but what's that magic number you get to where the cost isn't worth tearing down, or it is worth tearing down? That's why we say yes to say nurseries and drive-in theaters and storage units are actually nice interim uses, because they tear them down pretty cheaply and rebuild something you want. Well, we've crossed that line a little bit. Now it's more of a structure. Now it's getting a little more expensive. We've gone too far today.
And storage units that don't seem to ever want to.
Yeah, I make too much money.
Transfer it out into something else.
any other questions? Mr. Maxwell?
I'll throw this up now rather than later, or maybe later as well, but staff analysis. And I really appreciate these forums, and they really help communicate, but I also understand forums sometimes we get tired of filling out the same boxes or whatever. But staff analysis 1A, public purpose for the amendment in question, allowance for one-story commercial buildings. I mean, that's the purpose of the amendment, but that's not really the public purpose. And it almost communicates to me that we're struggling to find, like, how is the public actually benefited by this? So I'm questioning that myself. Is this really in the best interest of what we're trying to achieve downtown?
I have a place for Juice and Java.
Other questions?
Can I have one more question? With all those, we have several real small pieces in this area. This is the hard part for me, is putting together something for like you said, parking on this kind of thing for a two-story building. How are we planning on accommodating? Are we going to have to combine pieces? Is that what we're telling people, that they can't do anything with their property? Because some of them you just cannot put two stories on.
Yeah, we do have a limitation. You've got to have so much square footage combined into an area to realize the full densities and the other, requirements and, incentive to consolidate properties. It's an issue we're kind of exploring now in Joaquin because we have some areas of less than 40,000 square feet, which allows the maximum density, but it's surrounded by existing apartments. You can't expect somebody to go buy one of those, tear it down to build a new one. And so there are situations along these edges too that I think, you can acquire so much land, but you're probably not going to acquire Smith's gas station site or, certain other things get in your way. And so what do you do with the ones that can't quite get there? Because in some cases, maybe get some what Dave's saying too, you end up building something that's in between that causes even more problems because it costs too much and it's not quite what you want. And that's why I say it's kind of an active thing we've got to dig in and keep looking at instead of just saying, hey, we've reached nirvana there and we're done. I think we really need to look at situations as they come in.
Yeah, can we define them by parcel size, or so we're just doing that in specific areas in the D21 so that we're not opening it up for the entire zone, but just for these specific, like smaller parcels that only make sense to have this 1-story 12-foot.
Yeah, we certainly could. I mean, we could give you a better in-depth study on a lot of these areas as to, what's there, how many parcels are owned by the same person, are easy to consolidate versus ones that, are federally owned or something else that may be tougher to acquire in some aspect. Not for tonight, though.
Mr. Winterton and I spent some time in Lincoln. And that was an eye-opener. It's always interesting to see how different people approach the same problems and how they approach parking is very different than how we approach it. I'm wondering though, it seems like we are going to have some significant surface lots / structured parking that's going in with current developments. Do we need separate parking for a juice and Java or a 2-story building if there are these garages / on-street parking that's nearby? Are they going to be able to buy into these structured parking? So and
that's certainly a big consideration. Sometimes you build a structured park and everybody buys their density into those rather than building separate structures. The other issue you're going to come up with is do you allow drive-throughs? Because that takes up just weird traffic patterns if you're really trying to build up an area. Can I add, did you like RDA or economic development to address anything or?
If you have something to share, that's
put them on this one.
So we have been working with PEG, as you know, for not only the City View apartment, but for the entire courthouse / hotel structure. PEG is looking at the possibility of creating a multi-block development that could potentially touch this. And so it is conceivable that there will be a higher density that would go into the surrounding area and that there would be parking within close proximity to this. This is primarily being to, I apologize, I can't pronounce the gentleman's last name. Jimmy, he is the, he and his wife own Juice and Java. And so they have been tenants on the block where they've been for a number of years. And unfortunately, when their lease expired, the then landlord would not enter into a further agreement with them, but simply kept them on a month-to-month. When the courthouse came about and decided that they were going to do this, they became forced to look for another site. So Jimmy has entered into a partnership with PEG to develop this potential site that he's looking at now. He just cannot afford to build the 2-story building at this time. So they are requesting this change primarily for Juice and Java to be able to facilitate their replacement site. They are going to have to go dark for a time, but they plan to rebuild and reopen and rebrand and continue to service the Provo community.
But they can't build a single story 14-foot. So they might just one single story that meets at least the minimum standard if they were to build up.
I can ask. I don't know that off the top of my head. I know that they've been kind of paring this down in order to meet his financial constraints.
And it may be that if someone's going to build a single story, that we don't want them to build 14 to keep the costs such that it makes sense for it to be torn down later. But I see what you're saying, that if you build
The plan
it,
is to eventually build on top and build up, then
Yeah.
it builds something that can stay. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not the.
it just,
I mean, it may be that the incremental addition to the cost could be enough that it's not going to be overwhelming the way building in a completely two or greater story building was.
it would surprise me a little bit that there's no plates on Center Street or no.
It's the drive-through. The drive-through is the critical component. The bulk of his business is drive-through. There is some walk-up. There's some that come in and stay, but the majority of the clientele uses the drive-through to get their beverages and to move on.
For that store seems like a smaller, more cozy looking vehicle. I don't know, kind of that was what I've seen.
The other thing that kind of constrained him in his search for a replacement property was the proximity to the convention center. So. And then he just rejected most of them because they were too far away from the convention center.
He's very, very persuasive.
I know the bulk of his traffic is early morning or late evening.
You can pretty well see what he's got over here, First North. The backup that you're doing, it's so delicious.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Thank you. So the next item of business is PL Wolstenholme FLP requests a general plan amendment for 2 lot remnants from the public facilities designation to residential designation. This property is located at approximately 4600 North Windsor Drive in Sherwood Hills. This is being presented by Oscar Ford.
Thank you. This property that you see in blue is the current boundaries of the Sherwood Hillside Park. A majority of this land on the north here was actually donated for the purpose of the park by the applicant a number of years ago. And at that time, it was the general plan amendment, or the general plan and the zoning was changed to facilitate that park development. Since that time, the park has been built out, and the applicant also owns the smaller highlight that you see in the rear here. He's looking to do a residential development back there, and through the process of the engineering and determining access for that property, between them and our own engineering department, they determined that this was actually the best location for providing road access into the property. So as a result, he's requested to be able to take that property back. And the Parks Department has consented with that. They have no plans for developing it in any way. They're pretty much built out on what they're planning on doing for the park anyway. And so the request that's before you is basically to take the general plan map and the zoning back to its original designation before he donated the property. There's no changes to any of the text that's in the policies of the general plan, and it falls in line basically with that. It's primarily just a map amendment. Any questions?
Any questions?
Did he asked, did we initiate this and say, hey, you know, this, we don't want to deal with this land, so we're going to give it back, or was it requested back? I mean, how did that?
It's come as a request. He's working on developing that piece behind it, and because the road access works out better to come, I guess, to talk a little bit about that. This is a pretty good incline. So by the time you get up here, there's actually a pretty strong topographical difference between where he's looking to build homes on that side. So in order to facilitate an easier road into the property, with the addition of this property, he's actually not adding any lots or anything. It's really just to facilitate the road access.
Is that road, so it is a road, not a driveway?
Correct. Yeah, I guess we could come down here. This is a street view of, you can see the park down here. Those are the tennis courts. It's kind of the boundary of where they've decided. This is the area that he's looking to take back. And then that's the proposed subdivision. So the road would access through here. It would create 2 remnant parcels that would become part of the HOA. He's talking about landscaping them and possibly an entry monument into the development, but he wants to dress it up so that it's better than just the weeds that exist right now.
Is there essentially a blind corner then where you drive up from here? When you drive up from here based on the elevation, does that not become a blind corner for a car coming that way?
So
rather than we don't go straight up.
You mean as far as coming straight up right through here?
Rather than that, as opposed to where it is, because wouldn't that create a blind corner?
I know that this had been discussed previously. He works with our own engineering department through numerous different iterations. He actually even had the road coming down from up here originally, and it was in conversations with our engineering department that they determined that would be the best and safest location. Feels like that. It's really loud.
I drive that all the time, and it works. It would work.
It would work.
I know the property was donated to us, and but there's reasons to do that. To have a park increases the property values and all that. Is it unreasonable to consider having him buy it back?
So the property's actually already been deeded back to him. The Parks Department was fine with deeding it back, and considering surplusing the property would basically go back to the original property owner anyway.
Oh, okay.
They just went through that process.
But that's standard operating procedure. When the property owner gives it to us, if we're not going to use it, we give it back to the property owner for that. That's a standard operating procedure.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's typically even in the deed. It requires it to be returned if we're not going to use it.
You're pretty tough.
That's a compliment.
All right.
Are there any other questions? Thank you. So that takes care of 8 and 9 with the zone change request, correct?
Sure.
So item number 10 is Dr. Wendell Gagey requests a zoning ordinance text amendment to section 14.38.025 and section 14.38.085 to allow for larger electronic signs
Between 3,000 and 3,300 North University Avenue for emergency healthcare services. And I'm not scheduled.
Okay, this request deals with 2 aspects of the sign ordinance. The first deals with the size of the signs and locations. The second deals with the electronic usage. One of the most recent amendments to the ordinance we had was in, I apologize, I think it was 2008 or 9, somewhere in there, that dealt with the electronic signs on University Avenue. If you look at the restrictions for the city, it says no electronic signs except in these areas, and then specifically lists those areas out. For University Avenue, the only area allowed is really the south area over the viaduct going toward the mall. Everything else on University is restricted, not having electronic signs. Now, certainly there are some that people notice. Those Bulldogs is one of the exception areas, so you do get some on the corner of Bulldog Boulevard. And then also Riverwoods has very large electronic signs. Those were specifically allowed in 2003, I believe. And then you have some monument signs that you have some of the other businesses, and we've got a couple of pictures of those. This shows the one on the first area going to the south, business there, office building. And then on the north, Dr. Gibby's is between these two. This is the Capital Community Bank sign. And if you notice, there's a electronic reader board on that portion of it. This is the electronic portion. You know, the rest of the signage is there. And this put in the areas about what those signs are, so you know. And then, of course, the big ones down in Riverwoods, which are quite large. One of the purposes you have those in shopping centers. Riverwood's one of the 3 large shopping areas we have: the mall, this area, and then on University Parkway. But a lot of times you allow these signs so that each individual business doesn't have little signs all over and make it very cluttered. So the idea is this is where you put it. Plus, obviously, that's a big revenue producer for cities on the retail. Dr. Gibby has made 2 prime arguments as to why he feels his signage is necessary. One deals with the services he has and some innovative procedures and things which are of national recognition, and some of his doctors, that there's not really a lot of advertising that he's allowed other than just on these little signs down at the bottom. The other is his urgent care allowance, and it feels like this sounds wrong, but he has to compete against IHC and Revere Medical. That you don't think of those as competition in the same sense, you think of service, but those are the principal arguments as to why he feels the sign needs to be larger. And he'll have some illustrations tonight that he has a presentation. Will show you what his proposed signs are. This again shows that urgent care sign. On the opposite side, it says imaging center, so he gets some signage on the buildings. He believes these really are things people wouldn't see unless you had the sign out on the road. And then this is showing the details of his sign that he's allowed, which are the monument signs with the certain face of about 60 square feet of reader board on those signs. And so going back to the ordinance amendments, it talks about the bottom line is creating a new exception for University Avenue East Side from 3000 North to 3300 North, which is very specific. And then the second one would come in on the river bottoms design corridor for properties greater than 600 feet of frontage on University Avenue that provide emergency health care services. The size of the sign shall be regulated by section 1438.095. 1438.095 is the SC3 zone. That's the large allowance section. Just to give you an idea of what that is, this is 3700 North, 3300 North, and 3000. The first sign we showed you was down in this area. I'm sorry, it's right here. Dr. Gibby's is this area here. So the first one's right 3000, that first reader board. It outlines the properties that would qualify on the east side of University Avenue in the middle. And then the frontages are given for those properties of 187 feet, and that's the Capital Commercial Bank. And then the second one, the 332, is the little strip shopping center there, and he's the only one at 615. And he believes that, you know, by narrowing the focus of that, that makes it so we're not in jeopardy. Planning Commission, and I guess some of our staff report felt that that's actually the opposite. It puts us in jeopardy because we're not allowing the same signage for other professional office zones and other people that could come in and claim theirs. Is just as important to advertise as his is. And, you know, it'd just be hard to hold it to, I think, one area that way where we allow that specific use to be different than other ones in the same zone. So for the reasons of basically it could be expanded very easily, the consistency of where we work to not have electronic signs through that area and really preserve it more as an entryway to the city, we'd recommend it against it. The Planning Commission followed along with that same recommendation.
Mr. Stewart? How do you justify the recommendation with on either side of him there are electronic signs?
They're non-conforming. Well, we can say that they were put in before the change was made. And so none have been allowed since that time.
Is that fair?
it's never fair for the ones that got in earlier, or for the ones that come after the ones that got in earlier, let's say.
And he mentioned that he built his, about the same time, but couldn't afford the sign, that he had that right at one time to build the electronic sign, but he didn't have the money for it, so.
His approval of his office building was on the same meeting as the change of the electronic signboard. So they were just right at the same time. So he didn't build his building and then couldn't take advantage of it. It was changed at that same meeting, so he probably never would have had the chance.
Okay.
But you should probably,
What's that?
should probably never.
Well, yeah, I guess if they hadn't approved the electronic sign ordinance, then he could have, but
Which
since
one came first?
they were together. Yeah, which one was on the agenda first?
Yeah, no, I'm serious.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to go back and look at that.
Does it make a difference, Brian?
Well,
He didn't apply for a sign.
business, he didn't apply for a sign, so he would have had to have submitted a completed application while it was allowed.
I had a phone conversation with Dr. Gibe. I apologize, should point this out. The allowance would be for signs the same size as Riverwood's. And extended poles, the height and everything else. He stated he's definitely willing to look at lesser signs and other things. So, through the conversation tonight, he may see other proposals as to, what he may or may not feel comfortable with.
The information he sent us shows a smaller sign, about 2/3, half the size of the big sign. But he hasn't, the ordinance doesn't allow him a bigger sign.
Yes, because he's just referring to the one section of the ordinance that allows the bigger signs.
So if we were going to approve a smaller sign, we'd have to change the amendment to the ordinance.
Yeah, there'd have to be more amendments just to, and I think, and Brian can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we would really have to look at the entire PO zone, or we'd have to look at putting him in a separate zone or something as to why you would allow a sign in one part of that zone to be different than another part of that zone. And, whether it's emergency service or something else, but we'd have to come up with I think, a pretty solid reason that way.
So, I remember in the general plan, chapter 1, there's something about protecting views and view corridors. So this would seem to be at odds with that.
The signs?
Yeah.
Yes, this, in both the general plan where it talks about that, as well as in the University Parkway, not the Parkway, I'm sorry, the University Avenue corridor plan. It really emphasizes us trying to make that more of a vegetative entrance, if you want to call it that, something that's a lot more pleasant as an entrance rather than the electronic and structural type entryway. Buildings are back a ways, because obviously the west side because of the old railroad right of way, but also, some of the intent on the east side also.
The answer to this question, but can we have an emergency sign, like a red, just a simple emergency care sign that does light up, that's red, that, would be more of a signal out on the road that those services are available there? Or care or whatever you're supposed to do.
Pretty broken this. There was a little bit of discussion on that, and there's some feeling that there may be some give, like if you put it over the top or have something, some kind of a symbol that people could see, would that be allowable as an emergency service sort of thing, something you could really break off that not everybody provides, and if you do, it's not that you can just go and get your tooth fixed in the evening, but really would provide some kind of medical emergency. And so there seemed to be at least some feeling that if he came in and talked about that, then that would be something the Planning Commission would look at, just not as massive as he wanted, but also not electronic.
So that's not considered electronic if it lights up?
No, it's the message board, like a TV, the TV screen is electronic, or the reader board, something like that, where the words go across. Yeah.
Is that monument sign the largest one that would be allowed on his, or would he be allowed? That's the largest one he's allowed.
Right.
Under the current ordinance.
Current ordinance, that's the size of the monument signs.
And that is illuminated sign, but not like an electronic.
Right, it's, I probably go the wrong way. Has some backlighting on the sign there, and then these are illuminated a little bit, the box light type of thing.
And to me, this is a way to find the place. It's not an advertisement. And he's looking more for advertising.
Yeah, he has the two arguments. One's the advertisement for the services, the other is the emergency service. So it's, and that was something, Planning Commission noted. Well, if you're arguing for the one, why is this different than anybody else up and down the street? You're providing a service that is same as a stockbroker in a sense. They may think theirs is just as critical. But the other is emergency that you go in and get fixed if you're broken, and that might be another argument, separate argument, but.
Any other questions?
Did I read somewhere, I think it was in the staff report somewhere, that there was thought that he could better utilize his signage already existing, that he could do different signage already within the zone as it exists?
Yeah, it's something I guess we were willing to look at is obviously on his building, because he's got them on the, front. Is there something that on the side or something else? And it's a trade-off because we don't want to make it too obtrusive on the building. We want, if we can, it'd probably be better out on the monument, take away less from the building. So I think it's some of those things that if there's really a desire to have that from the council, then we would certainly go in and find those things that we could, address that in a different way.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. This item and the last two items will be on our agenda tonight. So
The next item is Provo City Community Development Department requests an ordinance amendment to section 14.10, one-family residential, and section 15.04, conventional and open space subdivision requirements, create an allowance for variable lot subdivision and eliminating open space subdivision allowance. And this is also
Thank you. Notice your next items are all dealing with these ordinance amendments. We've talked a lot about this. It says it's gone to Planning Commission. Planning Commission has been looking at these for several months and has another series of amendments they're looking at. They didn't originally want to bring them all as one big bundle because they feel that gets pushed back and forth to make little bitty changes and everything gets held up. So they looked at ways they could push forward some items they felt very comfortable with without having to address it all at once, and then kind of come back and then restructure it all at once so they're adopted. Staff been looking at this last week in corner lots, so that's on your item tonight, and we had on the previous work session. These next three items were listed for right now. Staff would, however, propose that these items all be tabled. There are a couple of items that have come up. One I think we talked about a little bit before was design standards, and look at some particulars of that dealing like with garages and other setbacks. But just some intricacies with each of those that we feel that maybe we want to have some design standards or other elements that may go with those that could help us in the considerations.
So would these help older homes in the older parts of town, smaller lots?
Yeah, one of the principal intents was to allow infill really in established areas. Ones where we've had the neighborhood chairs say, we need more homes in our area, more kids in our schools, and some of those things, as well as the pioneer neighborhoods. A lot of our variance applications, so we feel like if we made these changes, we wouldn't have to have variance. It's nothing anyone disagrees with. We're just kind of stymied by the ordinance. We have areas that are zoned R1.10 where the lots are only 60 feet wide now, and some other things that way. And so the principal reason behind all that was really to open up a lot of the existing developments is to, look at some different aspects of a way to put more homes in there.
If you have an older home and it's 5 feet from the lot line, you want to add on to it, this will address that, so you don't have to be 10 feet.
It's not in this bundle, but it's in another one the planning commission's looking at now, the setbacks.
All right.
This was to allow some of the smaller homes to expand. Then how do you make sure that it's for that intended use and not to have redevelopments on more lots in the.
And I don't have a legal opinion on this one yet, but some of it would be, could we limit it by subdivision or places that have been previously subdivided up till like 1980 or 2000 or some date. So anything that's been previously subdivided, like an existing subdivision. The thought is
Existing subdivision.
yeah, you could come in and redo the lot. Say you take 2 lots and you're able to get 3 lots out of it. And, you know, because you got old homes that were taken away and putting things in. The flag lots, that you've got an easy way to do that now. Some of these, you know, it'd be interpretation as to whether existing subdivisions, pioneer neighborhoods aren't subdivisions, they're divisions off of blocks. So we'd have to, you know, word it the correct way.
So if a subdivision has to have homes on the subdivision, it can't be subdivided and never built or something like that.
We were thinking of the ones that hadn't been built too, because you do have some that are large areas, and that's a tricky thing because like in Edgemont, we have a couple of areas of frontages that with a little bit of change, you can get 1 extra home in there and it'd be almost the same as across the street. But, you know, how do you not call that a new development where in the southwest area, you know, you're not opening it up to every new area that we have coming in now. And so that's one of the things we really want to look at and see if we could pinpoint that if that's your interest and maybe give suggestions. But we'd say right now any subdivision that was recorded previous to a certain date or something that's in the pioneer neighborhoods or you know, something along those lines, so that it at least gives us a chance to see how it works even, you know, and if it works well, then maybe we say, okay, any new development can do this too, kind of a thing. You know, and again, some of the definitions, you know, dealt with like on corner lots, really what's the front, what's the side, and then having 2 side setbacks, if you recall, rather than having one be a rear setback. And we got a whole bunch of corner lots we can show you, which, you know, could become conforming and non-conforming. Variable lot subdivisions, that's restricted. Really, you have to have at least so many lots. That one's hard because that's not a redo of an area. That is a new, that's just a subdivision type. It's limited by the number of lots. Well, you'd have to have at least so many lots to be able to do it. You can't do it on like a 5 lot subdivision. You have to have, I think it's at least 10 or something. I'll have to go back and read it again. But, and then flag lots are, the big thing on that one is to try and take away the idea that it was discouraged. The Planning Commission felt that if we really want infill, especially in pioneer neighborhoods on some of these blocks or off the hill, the south side of Carterville neighborhood, you've got some deep lots. You know, how do you develop those without flags? And the idea of right now where you have maybe 1 or 2 lots off those flags, should we create something that allows more of a driveway where you could even have more lots off of that, you know, in the right situations that would work. And then for minimum lot widths, a lot of that again was because we've got a ton of subdivisions, so they're called R1.8, they're called R1.10, but if you look at their lot widths, they're much narrower. And so redividing some of the lots in that area really would be out of character with the neighborhood or anything else in there, but it would again allow possible infill areas. It's not, you know, like 300 homes going in, but it's a home here or there kind of spread out. And so those were the basic intents and like, you know, ways we've tried to address those. Setbacks is another one that, again, it's coming up, that deal with front, rear yard, and side yard setbacks, making changes in those areas.
Are there other questions?
I guess one, where would cul-de-sacs fit into that as far as determining new lots and fill-ins? And cul-de-sacs are a different animal sometimes.
They can be, because one of the thoughts of flag lots and allowing them more, you wouldn't need as an extensive network of cul-de-sacs. You know, sometimes cul-de-sacs are put in to pick up 1 or 2 lots. You're putting a lot of pavement, a lot of maintenance in where you may have been able to pick it up through just a driveway extension or something. And that's one thing the Planning Commission talked about. They thought it might be fewer cul-de-sacs that way in certain situations. Is that what you meant your answer?
Yeah, that, I need to talk with you.
And I guess just turn it back to you, if there's direction you want to give us or thought or anything else, or for some reason you want us to keep going ahead, let us know that too.
So this is going to be on September 6th. This is coming to us September 6th.
It would be.
In the council meeting.
Yeah, the corner lots is actually on tonight, the corner lots and definitions.
Yeah, and that's the one, I do have some thoughts about that one, just if there's a way to just avoid any unintended consequences, like I mentioned before, with those, so that it's used for what it's intended for, which we're trying to allow some of these smaller pioneer homes to be able to expand, right? And so that families can stay and they can grow in this house and they don't have to move out. They can actually invest in these homes and make them livable for longer. Or
the reorientation part of it, what's the front? That was changed about 3 years ago, where it used to be the narrowest of the sides of the lot was the front. And that caused a whole bunch of problems. And we changed that. We said that would solve maybe 80% of those problems. It would create another 10% of new ones. And then we still have another 20 to solve. And so that's a lot of what the orientation works about is okay, get rid of this idea of what has to be a front or not. It's really, do you have a street setback and then side setback, because that's what your neighbor has. And so it's really, that one was a huge one to help some of the neighbors, because a lot of variances are that orientation where the home is faced one way, now they want to build another, but it's a rear yard of 30 feet that's required instead of a side yard of 10 feet, which is very significant on some of those lots. The other part of that, the extra 10 feet that's required for corner lots, was really for small lots, because if you have two street setbacks, you've created an extra 10-foot setback on one of the sides. And the feeling is once you got to a certain point, then that extra 10 feet wasn't necessary because your lot's plenty wide to build on. And so, there's really two parts. One's describing what the fronts are and what the sides. The other one is just that 10 feet dealing with
they're applying those same principles to like new development all over the city. We're not going to get there going to be any issues.
Right. Yeah. I would say that one's 90% new development, because the other lots already exist. The only time it'd come into play is if somebody was subdividing something. But that second one would principally be new development.
So just all of your points.
I'll go as far as you'd like to go. I don't know if you want to spend the time, going through all that. We talked about, the reasons for those variable lots. They'd only be in R1.8 and larger. Minimum, you have to have a minimum number of lots to do it. Overall density set by the zone, allowed reduction of 10% for no more than 50% of the lots. And then we had a couple of examples. This shows one that's in front of Stonegate, this University Avenue on the top. This one shows with the variable lot allowance, when they have some lots that are 9,150 feet on the end, compared to if everything had to be 10,000 square feet. It adds up as, one extra lot. And then, we had Scott's Corner, because that was talked about on the other thing, because the Planning Commission had a question if they did a variable lot subdivision, what could they get out of that? It ends up as about 5 lots on 50 acres. So, it'd be 1 lot every 10 acres.
15 acres.
What's it? 15 acres. Oh, 15 acres. Yeah, they did. I'm sorry. So 1 lot every 3. I was doing a number of lots rather than the other. So, but those are the ideas on that one. And then, the right one. So, and then the idea on that one too, we've looked at rewriting the open space ordinance or allowance for subdivisions. We feel that there's some ways we could do that better. A lot of that, even addressing some of the cluster developed about, is there a way to, address those correctly. Flag lots would just allow, rather than discourage, have a uniform setback of 20 feet through the whole flag lot, rather than 10 foot on one side and a 20 on the front and the rear. That, if you've got your backyard there, that would give you an equal distance around that property. Now, it still allows for accessory buildings, which, any lot would have, but it's just trying to create something more uniform. And then we had some examples of the flag lots. different areas of the city, and then these driveway type clusters that you could come off, and Gables at Grandview that we already have that has something like that off of the private street system anyway. And then the one with lot widths, not the setbacks yet, the lot widths that dealt with introduces a 5,000 square foot lot, has reductions in the lot widths, and then this second part's the one it's the same as with the corner lot. If you approve the corner lot, then this is here. If not, then that wouldn't change. But that one's just reflecting that corner lot thing. The lot depth was the idea of removing most of that because you almost get that by default if you've got the width and have a lot more flexibility. And Planning Commission discussed just as long as we know you can have a certain width or depth on the lot that would still accommodate a home. Because they were looking at the different changes in setbacks, it was hard for them to say a certain distance. Likely you could say it could be the same depth as minimum width or something like that, and maybe come out with something. So those are, and then we showed examples of lot widths, I think, in each of the pioneer neighborhoods, just to show what those are, where R1.6s are 60 feet, and a lot of those are less than that. And as we go through, I'm going to think of where this is a Grandview. You got 80-foot lots on an R110, which are required to be 90 feet, and even some that are smaller than on the other side. I think this is Rock Canyon, again showing that on R110, where you've got smaller lots, and then in Edgemont, you got some 74s, 75s, where it's an R110 zone too, with a 90-foot requirement. So just some examples through the city. And they showed one area up there off 10th View that mentioned before that if you had narrower lots, you'd get one extra lot if this were ever divided out than what it'd be, which would be pretty close to what's across the street on the east side. There's a quick rundown. Any questions? Again, we just ask you, to continue that discussion and maybe put it on another work session where we get some more detail or that way.
Put on a work session on September 6th. And then we'll go to the regular meeting.
Brian, you wanted the item number 16 tonight is also going to be continued?
Right, the one on the corner lot is part of that. We'd recommend that you continue that one tonight too.
And I should clarify the Vicky signed, the 8, 9, and all of those are going to be September 6th. They won't be tonight. I was mistaken. So those will be heard on September 6th.
Right, the PEG development and the Ivory one are tonight.
The what ones?
The PEG, the juice and job and the Ivory one.
Right, yeah, and I just spoke to
6 and 7.
6 and 7, 8 on September 6th.
So we do have, let's see, are there any updates there?
We have two items. First, I've got a handout that I'd like to distribute. Some of you may have received an email in the last couple of weeks from the Utah Taxpayers Association relative to the sale of the potential purchase of the Bayview landfill. We've talked about that, and we're happy again to spend more time talking about it if you'd like, but this little fact sheet that was put together by New Era, which is the consortium of public sector waste districts that are contemplating involvement with Bayview, I think we'll answer most of those questions, but again, we'd be happy to meet individually or happy to put it on a work session agenda to talk in more detail about it if you'd like. Secondly, we are beginning the process of recruiting for our next class of Provology 101. And so we wanted, number one, to solicit the council's help in identifying good candidates. Again, the idea of Provology 101 is to bring people who have interest but virtually no experience into a setting where they can learn a lot about what happens in city government and city services. We've had 2 cohorts so far, so this will be our 3rd. And we'll be recruiting over the next couple of weeks. So again, either the Provology webpage on the city's website or the mayor's blog. I think we'll have a link tomorrow where you can go express your interest in participating. The other thing we want to mention to you is we are contemplating the possibility of doing a Provology 201, which would be designed more for those who have already been involved in some fashion. So these might be neighborhood chairs, they could be board and commission members, others who've had some involvement in the city, but might enjoy going a little more in depth on some specific topics. And so we are going to solicit also interest in that. We're not guaranteeing that we'll put a program together. It kind of depends on how many people are interested and what kinds of topics they'd like to delve into, but we'd appreciate any feedback you have in that regard also. So we essentially run it at the same time as Provology 101, but we would, so if you have, for example, energy and police in one evening in that order, for Provology 101, the 2nd hour we'd flip that, and so those topics would be available on the off cycle to the Provology 201 participants. And so while we might do, for example, a broad discussion about the energy department, we might spend the 2nd hour with the Provology 201 folks talking about sustainable power, for example. So we take a smaller slice, but dive deeper. And so again, we wanted to explore that possibility. And so we just wanted you to know that that was kind of on the horizon. And again, if you have people that you think might be interested in a more advanced Provology, you can pass that information on to us as well.
For council's benefit, council has been assigned, which means probably myself and maybe some members of council, to participate in a session with the mayor's office on October 19th.
So we are planning on having a closed meeting today. And did you want to introduce that, Mr. Chairman?
Sure, I'd be happy to. There is a closed session requested, and it does deal, the matters that are intended to be discussed in that closed session all have to do with disposal of city property, which is an appropriate for a closed session to have a strategy discussion regarding those things. And we have a motion to close the session.
Look for a motion. Thank you, Mr. Watkins. Thank you, Mr. Sewell. Those in favor? You're voting is unanimously approved.
So the who's coming about 4:15, and we're actually